Alright guys, welcome back. We're talking about biogeography today. Biogeography is a huge topic in physical geography, and I apologize, I'm not going to be doing it justice in this class. Bottom line is there's a lot of stuff to teach. So anyway, if you're into this, they teach this kind of stuff in obviously biology and also in geography departments around the world. Okay, so thus far in the class, we've looked a lot at climate and how the sun impacts our planet and how the planet spins around the sun and has a tilt. And so the equator gets a lot of energy, the poles get hardly any. And another major thing that solar energy to our planet is it generates our biomes, our life that lives on the surface of the planet and in the oceans. So the definition of a biome is a large, stable terrestrial ecosystem characterized by specific plant and animal communities. Can you guys think of a biome? Yeah, maybe you thought of like a desert. You guys live in the Sonoran Desert and it has specific plant animal species associated with it. If you go up on the Mogollon Rim, up where Flagstaff is, you have the Ponderosa Forest up there. That's not a major global biome, but you get the idea. It has its own specific plants and animals associated with it. So here's the chaparral biome. This is what you guys see if you head to San Diego or Los Angeles to try and get out of the heat in the summertime. And if you notice the vegetation that's growing here, it's not like big trees or anything. It looks a lot like, I don't know, a lush desert. And that's what it is. But what's fascinating is it gets a decent amount of rainfall, but it doesn't get that rain in the summer. It's dry in the summer. Mediterranean climates have a dry summer. And that's when plants want that water. They want the water in the summer because that's when it has all the energy coming from the sun and can do a lot of growing. Because it doesn't have the water in the summer but has it other times of the year, you end up with this kind of scrub brush type vegetation and then obviously associated animals. All right. Take a minute and look at these pictures. And obviously, I hope you can tell which one is a desert ecosystem and which one looks like a rainforest. And what I want you to do is take a minute or two and I want you to, I don't know, write down the different plant adaptations to these environments. What are the plants doing to make themselves effective in these different climates? What are the desert plants doing? And what are the rainforest plants doing? So take a minute and do that. All right, now let's talk about them. So things that the desert plants are going to do, which you guys probably wrote down, is they'll have deep roots, right? Deep roots will go down to be able to get moisture out of the ground. Some of the plants, like cactuses, have the ability to store water. So does the saguaro. The ocotillo has really tiny leaves because there's plenty of energy coming in from the sun. It doesn't need big leaves to get that energy. It needs to keep those leaves small so it doesn't waste the energy it takes to make big leaves. If we go over here in the rainforest, it's the opposite, right? We have really big leaves, and that's because over here what the plants are competing for is sunshine, right? They're trying to get as much sunlight as they can because everybody is growing on top of everybody else. So bigger the leaves tends to be really effective. You're not going to see plants here storing water because there's water falling out of the sky all the time. So no needs to adapt in that direction. Okay, so let's take a look between, the link between elevation and latitude. This was first figured out by the famous early geographer Alexander Humboldt. And what you notice is, I'm going to skip to the next image. What you notice is that as you head from the equator all the way up to the poles by latitude, you get a different succession of plant types or biomes as you go northward. You can start with tropical rainforest, temperate deciduous forest. That's like what you have back east. Needle leaf forest. This is what you have covering all of Canada. The tundra forest. I'm sorry, it's not a forest. Tundra is small plants struggling in the very, very cold Arctic, and then ice and snow up at the poles. You'll see the same breakdown of major biomes as you head up towards the top of a mountain. So Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa has tropical rainforest at its base, but because it's, I believe it's 20,000 feet tall, it covers all these different biomes as you go up the flanks of the mountain, and it actually has retreating glaciers up at the mountain top. So you're seeing the same breakdown in biomes as you go up in elevation and as you go northward or southward in latitude, which is cool, right? And it's the same idea. As you get higher in elevation, things cool off because there's less air molecules to absorb energy. And as you move northward or southward, you get less energy because of the way the Earth is tilted as it goes around the sun. Okay, big terms. We hear them all the time. Ecosystem and ecology. An ecosystem is a self-regulating association of living plants and animals in their physical environment. So in an ecosystem, like you have these turtles that fit in this environment they're in. These turtles can eat the plants, and they're basically set up to eat these kind of plants or stuff that's growing in there. I don't really know if there's actually animals that eat turtles. Yeah, there probably is. But then there's predators in here that if they don't eat turtles, they're going to eat other things. The turtles are going to poop. The poop falls in the water. There'll be bacteria in this water that's developed to break that poop down into nutrients that then these plants can utilize. And so they all sort of work with each other to generate an ecosystem. Here's another diagram of it of the sun. The first thing you get are your producers, which are the plants. Then you get consumers, rabbits. Gosh, I want to say ducks. I don't know why ducks popped in my head. Ducks, elk, deer. They eat the plants. And then you have the predators that are going to eat those plant eaters. And then as they die down, you have fungi and bacteria that break them down. It releases all the nutrients that have been stored in these critters to be utilized again. Okay, so these, you can think of the entire planet has an ecosystem, and then obviously down into, I don't know, what's in your front yard will have its own ecosystems, or probably even smaller, which is fascinating. And the study of that is known as ecology, the study of the relationships between organisms and their environment among the various ecosystems in the biosphere. Okay, so if you're working in this ecosystem, right, and you're a critter or a plant in this ecosystem, you have a role, you have a niche that you do in that ecosystem, right? Oh man, my cat poop stinks. Poop, decomposition. Anyway, I got off track. Tigers have a specific niche, right? The tiger cannot choose to become a vegetarian and be like, man, I'm just going to do nothing but nibble on this grass. Nope. It has a specific role. All those muscles, the stripes, the ears, its eyes, it's all developed to be a predator, to eat large mammals that are living in the forest that those tigers live in. Okay, that's its niche, and it can't choose to change that. Here's a dragonfly. A dragonfly is kind of like a tiger in the bug world. They go around and eat other bugs. Okay. The question over here is, are there going to be more tiger or dragonfly critters in an ecosystem versus fungus and plants. Hopefully it makes sense. You're going to have a lot more fungus and plants because these guys are what's known as the top of the food chain, right? There's a whole ecosystem underneath in which tigers and dragonflies need in order to operate. Tigers eat, I'm going to say gazelle, but I don't think they eat gazelle, right? And the gazelle eat the plants, and it has all this stuff underneath them in order for them to operate. So that you can't have a ton of tigers and only a few plants or a few gazelles, right? So there's kind of a pyramid scheme, and not a pyramid scheme, but less tigers and dragonflies than there are plants and fungus. Here's some fungus. I don't know why I included this picture of lichen, although lichen's pretty. Anyway, these are little communities of organisms, bacteria, fungus, that live on rocks and help break rocks down. Okay, this is cool. This is the engine of our planet, the battery that allows our civilization to exist and our global ecosystem to exist. Okay, so up here we have photosynthesis. Photosynthesis requires light. Well, let's do it down here where it's clear to see. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, water, and light in a plant. You mix those together, and through photosynthesis, you're going to get glucose, and you're going to give off oxygen. Okay? Glucose is it, man. Glucose is the stuff that allows us to have energy. Everything you eat, doesn't matter what diet you're on, all that energy you're getting is coming from glucose that's being stored in a variety of different ways. Plants also need to breathe, they need to respirate, and the reason why is if you take glucose and add it to oxygen, you'll get a chemical reaction that gives off carbon dioxide, water, and the key thing, heat energy. Okay, that heat energy is what allows plants to grow and do their thing. And as a result, chlorophyll, which is the part of the plant that allows photosynthesis to take place, this is it, man. It's the engine. It's what generates all the energy that we utilize in our world and civilization today. When I say civilization, like you have wind energy doesn't involve chlorophyll, nuclear energy doesn't, but all our fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, and coal, which is basically what powers our civilization, is basically old dead plants that came from past organisms that had chlorophyll that stored it in what we're using today, which is, I think fascinating. All right, net primary productivity. So this is kind of cool. So if you look at this image of our world, it's showing you where you're getting the most plant life. Well, not plant life, I guess, plant and animal life throughout the world. And what you see here is where you don't have a whole lot. The way they broke down these colors is kind of weird, but where you don't have a whole lot is towards the poles. Okay, poles, hardly any, and where you have the most is at the equator. Why do you think that is? Yeah, it's because this is where most of the solar energy is coming in and impacting our planet, and I apologize. And they have a lot of water. And if you have a lot of water and a lot of solar energy, you're going to get a ton of animal and plant life. And that's where we have our highest net productivity, which is neat. Okay, important element cycles. The first one, the carbon cycle. This one is hugely important right now. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our civilization is being powered by the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. And when we're burning that stuff, it comes out of our cars, it comes out of our power plants, and it's pumping a lot of carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere when you release it. Carbon dioxide is a powerful greenhouse gas, and it will allow the planet to warm up. Another aspect of that, or another associated gosh, why can't I talk? I probably should start over, but I'm not going to. Another aspect of that carbon being released into the atmosphere is that a lot of it will get absorbed into the oceans. And so when the oceans absorb a lot of carbon dioxide, it makes the oceans more acidic, so the pH drops. And a lot of our carbon dioxide is getting stored in the oceans, but it's also making it more acidic, which is basically making it tough for critters in the ocean to make shells and stuff, and for corals to make corals. So anyway, but the whole point is it's all a cycle. It gets dumped, into the ocean. Ocean water can, or it can get tied into shells, which then can form rocks, and that can lock it down. But carbon dioxide could also get used as photosynthesis and get stored back into a tree or plant. That tree or plant can die, CO2 gets released, or it can burn, CO2 gets released, but then it can get brought back in through chlorophyll. And so it's always cycling in and out all the time. So right now we have a high amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but that doesn't mean in the future that carbon dioxide can't go down. In fact, in the bigger picture, we're talking millions of years, it is going to go down. And we're all dependent on it. And what our civilization wants is stability. We want about the same amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere as goes out. That's what would help keep everything stable, and is what we're working towards. Whew. Man, I hope that made sense. Another example is a nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a key component of life needed for plants to grow. And what you see here in red is an algae bloom near the Mississippi River. And what will happen is all the agricultural fields up here in the Midwest have tons of fertilizer on the crops, and that fertilizer gets dumped out here into the Gulf of Mexico, which is, I don't know, doesn't have a whole lot of circulation. It's got a big bathtub. And that nitrogen causes all the plants like, woo, sweet, let's have a party, crazy, crazy. And they have so much party, grow so much, that they basically suck out all the oxygen out of the water, and it becomes a dead zone, and everything kind of dies. Not kind of dies, it does die, which is kind of sad. And the whole point of that is you got to keep everything in balance. You don't want to ever overload. Like this nitrogen seemed like a good thing at first for these critters, but then obviously it proved bad. Too much of a good thing. You got to keep this all in a nice cycle. Some coming in, some coming out, moving around. Okay, ecosystem stability and succession. Okay, so this is kind of a cool picture. This is what it would be to be a farmer and go crazy. And that's because there's like 15 different crops that are growing in these little squares out here on this farmland, which would be a total hassle to actually go through and pick up the crops. But what's neat about doing it this way is it makes the soil very healthy, because some of the plants will utilize some of the nutrients in the soil while other plants use other different ones, and so they tend to feed off each other, and they keep the soil very, very healthy. If you grow the same plant on the same plot of land for a couple, 2 or 3 crop cycles, it'll become leached of the important nutrients that those plants need. So you want biodiversity. You want as many different plants and animals as possible to keep soils regulated and healthy. That's what grows our food. That's what grows our food. Sorry. Succession. So as the climate heats up and is predicted to continue to keep heating up, we're going to have a succession of forests. So this is a current range of beech trees here in the eastern United States. But as the climate warms up, these trees are not going to be able to survive down here because it's too hot. And so they're going to move northward and have this range up here with only this little area of overlap. They're going to start migrating northward where it's cooler temperatures, which is neat. It's kind of fascinating. This happens all the time throughout geologic history. Also fascinating, this is a lava flow that I think is, guys, when the picture was taken, it was only like 5 years old, like a little baby rock, which is cool. And then here's some ferns that are growing on it. That's the only stuff that's grown on this rock. And what's neat is in terrestrial succession, you always have plants that are kind of the pioneers. They're the ones that first get in there and start working with the nutrients. Now, this rock is kind of like rock candy, man, because it has tons of nutrients in there that no plants have utilized. But it's tough because it's all locked up. It's not in a soil that's easy for these plants to get to. But these guys, these pioneers, are tough. They're like, boom, I'm going to get in there and get those nutrients. And they start breaking it down and start making the first soil. And then eventually, over time, you'll start getting a soil and you'll start building up an ecology on that fresh rock. Here's Mount St. Helens in 1983. Obviously massive. Actually, the eruption I believe was in 1980. So this is 3 years after the eruption. So you're starting to get some plants, and then by 1999, you start to have the forest coming back. So these are the initial pioneers, and you're starting to rejuvenate the landscape following these disasters. Fire succession is the same thing. This is the famous Yellowstone fire. Um, it was rough. Watch out, Bambi. And this is what it looked like after the fire. Obviously, a bunch of tall trees, but there are trees that are coming back, and it will eventually stabilize as it goes through this succession. It's kind of fascinating because people thought this was a huge disaster, this fire, but it turns out the lodgepole pine that grows up here in Yellowstone, it's adapted to do this, to have these big crown fires once every 50 to 100 years. Bog succession, which we don't have here in Phoenix at all, but it's possible back, or not possible, happens in the Midwest a lot, where you have these old glacial lakes. Um, you have open water, but as it fills in with sediment, you basically have, at first, you have this underwater plant life that's growing, but then as it fills in with sediment, it'll transition into near shore, and then eventually out to the edge where you have trees, and so lake bog meadow transition. All right, guys, we did it. Here's your things to know, what you're going to need to know for the exam. Good luck with that. Study that. Hope you had fun. You're awesome. Have a good one.